thank you for speaking to us this morning. How are you?
I'm great. I'm doing okay. I'm just very rattled and shaken up. We were actually at the North Bondi RSL, so about 50 meters from where it happened. We were sitting outside when we saw about, 500 people running from the beach. And at first we thought, we've never heard gunshots before, so we thought there were fireworks. And people were just running past us. So everyone started screaming, get down, get down, get down. So we were all on the ground, just completely rattled. Like we had no idea what was going on for the first 10 minutes. And then the Bondi local community is so small, we started getting text messages from our friends who were actually even closer at a cafe, maybe 10 meters from where it happened. And they were saying there was two gunmen on the loose. So we locked down the North Bondi RSL and we were locked up for about 2 hours. We had multiple people with gunshot wounds actually come up to the North Bondi RSL looking for doctors and nurses. And then the ambulance arrived shortly after, about 30 minutes later, to help them.
Gosh, and
Yeah.
I guess you saw the in front of your own eyes the best and worst of people in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I was just talking to my partner about this because when you're in the North Bondi RSL, there's obviously everyone was sitting there and just in complete shock. We were on the ground and then we saw, people still drinking and eating. We were just gobsmacked. We couldn't do anything. We just felt so helpless. And in that moment, I guess, we're calling our loved ones. We had friends with kids walking home about 30 minutes before, and we were just calling them to make sure they got home safely. And a few of them were actually taking their kids to the playground, which was next to the Jewish event. We had seen videos of people we knew at this event and friends still now trying to reach out to those families to see if they're okay. And we don't have confirmation. We don't know if they are okay, which is really scary. I think the hardest thing is like the children that were involved in this event and seeing them on the ground screaming and crying. Like it's such a safe place. Like that's been taken from us.
And it's a place that you know well. This is your home.
Yeah. Yeah, we go there every day. Me and my partner were walking across that bridge that morning. We actually parked our scooter where the car with the bomb was. And obviously, like, we went for a swim that morning. It was a beautiful, normal day in Bondi. And then that afternoon, we went to the North Bondi RSL as you do on a Sunday and just looking, out at the beach. And it was just like horrific. I've never seen anything like it, the screams and the cries. You never think it's going to happen somewhere like Sydney. It just feels like such a safe place.
And look, this is clearly a barbaric attack on the Jewish community. And
Yeah.
it always strikes me that Sydney is a place where communities tend to sort of
Mhm.
rub along quite well together, support each other,
Yeah.
are
Mhm.
friends and neighbours. Is that a
Mhm.
fair description of the Sydney you know?
Absolutely. We're very multicultural and we love everyone. And I feel like we are such an accepting place, especially Bondi, because, you know, everyone comes there for a visit. When you come to Sydney, Bondi is usually the first place they go. And I was thinking yesterday how many people, especially even at that Jewish picnic, at that Jewish celebration, like how many of them were visiting, because it is such a special place. The Jewish community is huge in Bondi, and where I live, which is about 4 minutes drive from Bondi and Rose Bay, um, you know, the Jewish community is so prominent here. So, we obviously like everyone is just the same. We're the same. Like there's never been any discrimination. So it's shocking. There's just no way that you would think this would happen.
Are you going to go
It's
back to the
crazy.
beach today?
You know what? I am because I want to pay my respects. I think, a lot of people are scared and shaken up, and I am too. But at the end of the day, like, this is the park we walk through every day. And just to know that people were hurt there is just rattling. We want to pay our respects. We want to bring flowers down. And yeah, I feel like, you know, we're still in shock. It's hard, we haven't started, like, I'm almost in the mourning phase, and we want to go down there and just pay our respects.
And just finally,
Yeah.
Elodie, as I was saying to Isabel, who we just spoke to from ABC News, we had
Mm,
a Julia Langdon, who's a journalist here in the United Kingdom, made a point in our paper review just earlier that these are the sorts of events that countries, communities can struggle to recover from, that things never quite the same again in the aftermath of something like that. Is that something you feel is a possibility?
I was just thinking that. I was just watching videos and it felt like it'll never be the same down there. I don't know how it could be when, we're now at the death tolls at 16 and just to know their last moments were there. How can we go down there and feel anything but sadness for those families, for those friends who lost their loved ones? Like the fear that, they were transported to in those last moments just makes me so upset. So I don't know how it will be the same. It's definitely not going to be happy Bondi summer, but what we are going to do is we're not going to let these terrorists take away that community. So I know that the community is definitely going to rally together for those people, and we'll definitely support them however best we can.
Sydney has experienced quite a few anti-Semitic attacks over the last few years. It's been an ongoing issue, but nothing like this. This was completely shocking. I think, Sydney has woken up stunned, in disbelief. We are a safe country. We thought we were a safe country. So to have something like this, something so horrific happen at one of our, most beautiful beaches. It's a world icon, Bondi Beach. So, we are, I'll be honest, still sort of grappling with what has happened and the magnitude of what has happened and where we won't go next with it.
You were there last night as well, Jordan, weren't you? You went down. What did you see?
So as soon as I heard about it, I jumped in the car like many reporters and headed on down to Bondi. And, driving down the cliffs of Bondi, it's beautiful. It's, the sun's like this purpley colour over the ocean. It's normally a place where people go to be at their freest in a way. You get all sorts of types at Bondi. But as I was driving there, I just was lapped by police cars, public order and riot squad, ambulance. It was eerily quiet apart from that. And I walked down Campbell Parade at North Bondi, which is this iconic street. Many Brits will have been to Campbell Parade in Bondi, your listeners. And it was just lined with ambulances, police cars. There would have been, dozens of them. And as I walked down, I saw witnesses and injured walking up the road. One of the first people I saw was a Jewish chaplain for the State Emergency Service who was at the function with his grandson. And his shirt was covered in blood. His hands were covered in blood. He had been at this party on the beach. It was one of the many events for the beginning of Hanukkah held around Sydney last night, a festival of the lights. There'd been petting zoos and free donuts and there were kids running around. And it was a really joyous occasion. They were going to light one of the big menorah candelabra. He'd been with his grandson. He saw these men come along and start opening fire. He jumped on his grandson and another man slumped on top of him who'd been shot in the shoulder. And so this man was just walking up the street. He was in a daze, he couldn't believe it. I saw others, just surfers, beachgoers, guys who'd been in the water getting some rays, ignoring sun-safe messages, who were suddenly heard what they estimated was hundreds of shots fired from up the beach. They ran towards it. A lot of people ran away from it. People were hiding under cars. People ran into strangers' apartments. They were in restaurant bathrooms. He ran towards it. He found a woman with two small children hiding under a car. The kids said, "Mummy, mummy, help mummy." They pulled mummy out from under the car and she had 2 gunshot wounds, including one incredibly bad one in the back of her neck. So, these swimmers, these guys from another part of Sydney were just there for us hot. It was really hot yesterday, so a really hot afternoon, found themselves plugging gunshot wounds with their fingers, waiting for ambulances to come. So it was just an absolute scene of it wasn't quite chaos by the time I got there, but it had been in the aftermath. There's choppers overhead. It was something Sydney's never seen.
Mm. And Jordan, hi, it's Zoe Grunewald here. Thank you for sharing your account of what happened. I'm interested to know, obviously, this was a targeted attack on the Jewish community, but of course, there were people of Sydney, as you say, enjoying the beach as well, and the rest of the wider community. How did you see these two communities pulling together? And I wonder what you've seen today about, the other people in Sydney kind of wrapping their arms around the Jewish community and maybe helping them through this period of mourning, grief, and tragedy.
Oh, look, there was an extraordinary, as there often is in these situations, there was extraordinary heroism. There was extraordinary compassion. The people who ran to help were from all walks of life. There was surfers. There were members of Sydney's Arab community who were pulling these injured people from underneath cars. Sydney has really wrapped its arms around its Jewish community today. We don't know much about the shooters other than they were a father and son. We don't know, where their motives came from. We don't know whether they were part of a larger plan. There has been concern from our top spy agencies in the past that Iran has been behind some of the anti-Semitic attacks in Sydney and Melbourne. But yeah, the Sydney is just devastated for our Jewish community. Who are an integral part of this city. As Julian Lisa said, it's and this country, this has been a safe and free country where all religions, all walks of life are not only tolerated but embraced. So this is a significant kind of paradigm shift that everyone's trying to wrap their heads around.
Mm. Last night we were talking about this shooting at Brown University in Rhode Island, and we were talking about the sort of inevitability of something like that in America, and the gun conversation, and that debate reared its head, and then when this story broke this morning, Jordan, I must admit, one thing that struck me was it was sort of really felt really jarring and unusual to see an attack like this carried out with a gun in the way that it was, guns in the way that it was, given Australia's very strict gun laws.
Oh, this is very much a question we're all asking this morning too. So just for a bit of your listeners' benefit, back in the 90s, in 1996, there was a significant massacre at a town called Port Arthur in Tasmania. It was an old penal colony, and a young man called Martin Bryant went walking with a gun. He killed 35 people and he wounded more than 20 others. It was the deadliest massacre in modern Australian history. That prompted a strong tightening of gun laws. We had this sort of iconic moment in which our Conservative Prime Minister, John Howard, stood in front of, gun owners in Gympie in Queensland saying, we are going to tighten these laws. And ever since, Australia has prided itself on its gun laws. And, we see things like this happening in particularly the US, but in other parts of the world as well. And, we have this sort of feeling that, well, this wouldn't happen here because we don't have high-powered firearms. You can't buy an assault rifle at Walmart. So the question that's being asked widely today is, how is it that this guy, this suburban dad, was licensed not only for guns, but for high-powered assault rifles, the sort that you would probably only normally otherwise use in Australia if you were either in the military or you were doing, quite intensive pest animal control in the bush. They're supposed to only have 3. Even so, this guy seemed to have about 6. So there's a lot of questions being asked about, how tight are our firearm regulations? Have we been asleep at the wheel here? Have we been so smug about our Port Arthur gun laws that we haven't really been asking the questions has this slipped? Are we enforcing them? You know, how do you get a gun license? How do you get hold of a high-powered assault rifle? Why do you need one in suburban Sydney? You know, if you are a hunter, how do you prove that you're actually using these for hunting? So all these questions are now being asked. We don't know how much police actually knew about this father and son. There was an implication last night at a press conference with the police commissioner that they knew enough to be able to declare this a terrorist incident pretty quickly. So again, in coming days and weeks and months, this will be at the core of the questions that we will be asking the police and government is, how did this happen and what needs to be done to ensure that, you know, this doesn't happen again, that we don't need another reminder in, you know, a couple of decades' time that our gun laws aren't tight enough, because we need to remain forever vigilant on this issue.